In the modern age of gaming and the internet, fighting games are the most important genre we currently have. This is due mostly because no other kind of game fosters the player base that can possibly rival the fighting game community. The general consensus agrees that the FGC was either born with the release of Street Fighter II Championship Edition in 1992, or with the first Battle by the Bay tournament, later renamed to EVO, held in 1996. Nonetheless, the FGC is a staple of the gaming community that transcends the connotation of esports. You see, things like esports can be seen as far too sanitary and rigid to really get invested in. Companies like Riot and Blizzard are heavily involved in the promotion and syndication of their tournaments and disallow anything that they would deem as too risque or at risk to the company. Meanwhile, the FGC is rooted in good old-fashioned arcade thuggery, which some foolish company once tried to outright ban, which in doing so is kind of like taking the whole identity of a fighting game community away from itself, which, why the fuck would you do that, Capcom? Despite some of the rougher edges the FGC has with things like rampant homophobia and sexism, it still is one of the most closely knit communities in gaming today. Fighting games exist in a strange area when compared to most games. Most games you either play for intense moment-to-moment gameplay and or deep stories. Fighting games in general don't actually have that good of stories. They can have batshit crazy ones, looking at you guilty here, but the FGC does have some stories. Accepting the good with the bad and learning from stories of old is a major part of living itself. All of us take our own paths through life, and we are told the same stories. The tortoise and the hare, the boy who cried wolf, so on and so forth. So today, I want to take you through the highs and lows of life as told in a few FGC parables. I hope by the end of our time here that you too can understand how important the FGC is to gaming as a whole. So with minimal frame delay, let us take a walk through the FGC's finest tales as we search for the link between fighting games and the meaning of life. Chapter 1. Birth. Beginning of Legacy. Allow me to set the scene for you. It's 1996, Southern California, and you just want to go to your local arcade to play some Street Fighter Alpha 2. But instead, there's a strange energy emanating from the Golfland arcade. If only you knew that you were about to witness history. It was here that a legacy was born. Well, not actually. Technically, this is the first EVO, but there is very little to go on when it comes to what actually happened there. The grainy footage you're currently looking at right now is probably the best footage available of this tournament. Plus, this was more of a big deal local tournament, so everyone participating is from the general SoCal scene.
The home of the fantasy-like weekly tournaments that nobody else in America has.
Except for this one guy named Faraz from Kuwait. I don't actually know how he got there. Battle by the Bay 1996 is to EVO as the national championship is to the Super Bowl. Similar idea, but not exactly the same thing. There are a few names hanging around in BBB 96 that some will recognize, like Watts, Afro Cole, and Cali Power, aka Alex Valle. He'll be very important later on. Beyond just a small tourney that would spiral into a multi-million-dollar organization today, BBB 96 represents something very important about fighting games at this time. The strength of the FGC is that C, community. Think about it, it's 1996. Not to sound like a boomer, but there wasn't an easy way to spread the word about a big tournament at the local arcade, so it was entirely dependent on those who wanted to play against the best to come together and organize one themselves. And frankly, I think that's quite beautiful. Entering the new millennium, EVO itself began to, for lack of a better word, evolve into the form we know it to be today. Held in 2000, the B4 Championship introduced a few new games to the mix, eventual mainstays like Marvel 2, Alpha 3, and Third Strike. What I find so fascinating about B4 is with the expanding of games allowed in, you see a growth in the amount of players this tourney ended up roping in. This is a small but important step for building the roster of the next Battle by the Bay tournament. 1 year later, in 2001, the B5 Championship was held, and this is the most EVO any of these tournaments got before it began to be named as such. This is a goddamn championship. Maybe they wouldn't have known it then, but so many popular and influential players showed up at this tournament and made their mark. Players pretty much anyone knows like Jaywong, Biscant, and Combo Fiend.
My power is gone!
Unlike BBB 96 and B4, we see some players coming from Canada and even Japan to participate. The expansion of the community in these early days was critical to the growth and thrival of the FGC. Now we enter 2002. I was a fat, pudgy baby, and EVO was officially born. EVO 2002 was and still is a big deal. Not only did it cement how EVO functions with its double elimination brackets, but it also introduced the FGC's renegade persona. At the end of the night during the finals of MVC2 between Jaywong and Rotron, their set had to be cut to a best of one due to the venue staff shutting down and kicking the entire event's participants out. Which isn't really important, but come on man, this is the stuff the FGC lives for.
Thank you all for coming this year, and good night.
Another anecdote out of this EVO is one I sadly cannot confirm nor deny, but it still sounds hype, so I'll tell it anyway. This comes from the father of EVO himself, Mr. Wiz. He told a story about how back at EVO 2002, they organized an underground 5v5 invite-only MVC2 tournament built around the rivalry of East Coast versus West Coast. In match 4, there was this player named Sue Mighty, and he was up against the Marvel god at the time, Eddie Lee. People weren't really expecting much of this Sue Mighty guy, but in their match, he went apeshit. During his combo, he did 4 snapbacks on Eddie Lee's solo character. He somehow kept the combo alive and conquered the Marvel Mountain in one of the flashiest yet most low-key moments of EVO. Stuff like that is important. It's the first of many EVO legends, tales from the backroom if you will. Things that serve to big up EVO and the FGC's legacy. Thus was born the first of many myths from the FGC. And it brings our first chapter to a close. As we know, growing pains are to be expected in everything, and from EVO 2002 onwards, the FGC had been growing steadily. That is, except for the period known as the Dark Ages. So let's take a trip to that dark time period of the FGC to highlight the hero of that era. Chapter 2. Strife. John Choi, A Light in the Darkness. The years between 2005 and 2009 are considered the lowest point fighting games have reached in the West. With the drought of Capcom fighting games, the genre was wrought with mediocre title after mediocre title, only being kept alive by the 3D Mortal Kombats that are of questionable quality. I mean, Guilty Gear was hitting its stride at the time, and anime fighters were entering their renaissance, but that don't sell around here in America, you heard? And that's not important to our story, so shut up! With the waning popularity of fighting games in the West, the FGC began to suffer as well. Not much is really talked of from this era. The only highlight I often see mentioned is Jaywong's amazing comeback as Cyclops against Yipes in 07, but there is another story, one of John Choi, known by his handle Choi Boy. Okay, let's set the scene. It's EVO 2008. Many tales had their beginnings here, but the story of our Choi Boy stands high and mighty over them all. Competing in both Street Fighter II and CVS 2, Choi Boy entered under shaky circumstances. You see, Choi's dad was suffering from cancer for a while leading up to the event. Choi was set on not going to EVO so he could stay with his father during his recovery. Before the tournament, Choi Boy's dad went through a life-saving procedure, and after his operation, he encouraged his son to get ready and go to EVO. With his father's blessing, Choi trained for 2 days and made his way to the event. He was placed in a randomized SF2 pool with both Tokido and Graham Wolf, who placed first and third in the prior year's tournament, with Choi Boy taking second place. With that, the world was against him. There was a lack of training and an absolute hell pool to overcome. Choi was tossed immediately into the loser's bracket, but this did not discourage him. Choi Boy dug deep and made himself famous. He climbed out of pools and clawed his way into grand finals to face Shinya Nuki Onuki's Chun-Li, and he triumphantly took the set to win the SF2 tournament. This victory alone would have sent Choi Boy down in history as one of the greats. But being great is not good enough for our boy. Jonathan Choi is not great. He is a hero. In his now legendary run through the CVS2 bracket, it ended in his greatest challenge yet. When he reached the summit, only one man stood in his way. The immortal Boss. Ryo Boss Yoshida was one of the greatest to ever play. In the Japanese scene, he was not only considered to be a great player, he was heralded as a god, being called unbeatable. Boss was an incomprehensible monster. Problem is, he was also the only thing in Choi Boy's way, and you don't get in the way of a hero. In a nail-biting finale, Choi Boy Sagat took the set in the final round against Boss's legendary Blanca.
There's the fierce punch. He's gonna check. Game! Dramatic wins! John Tory wins! John Tory wins! John Tory is your CBS Team National Champion!
This feat of winning multiple championships has only been done by 17 players through the illustrious history of EVO, and only one man has done it in the same tournament. Through all the hardships and reasons to quit, Choi Boy refused to give up. He refused to fold, and he played the hand he was given to the best of his ability. Choi Boy didn't win for himself. He won for everyone cheering for him. Jonathan Choi is the hero the FGC needed when it was fading away, and with his legendary run, he shows how important it is to keep your head up and live on another day, even through our toughest times. Chapter 3, Brotherhood. Melty Blood Plays Dirty. Admittedly, this chapter is a bit shorter and not as impactful as the other, but I love this community so much I just had to include it. Released originally in 2002, Melty Blood is a fighting game based on the Type Moon visual novel Tsukihime and stars many characters from said game. Re-released multiple times, the current version most people play is Melty Blood Actress Again Current Code, released in the West in 2016. Melty Blood and its players are kind of a meme in the fighting game sphere, as they will literally play anywhere and everywhere. Melty Blood players are the most committed motherfuckers I have ever seen in my life. They're like cockroaches in the most loving way possible. They just refuse to fucking die. Whether it be a bathroom, a parking lot, the line to see Wooly, they will play and you, sir, cannot stop them. Stories of the Melty Blood community are great anecdotes to show a major aspect of the FGC that I adore, and that is a player's love of the game. Who cares if the game is like 20 years old? Who cares if it's only on PC? Who cares if it's based off of an old ass VN? Certainly Melty Blood players don't care. In fact, they embrace it. The fact that this community has grown and taken in so many people is one of the most encouraging things to see. Even if the mainstream FGC dies one day, we still have these great niche pockets where anyone can find a home. So I salute you, Melty Blood. Get your hustle any way you can. Now, please get out of the stall because you're holding the line up. Chapter 4, Challenging Destiny. Daigo Umehara rejects his fate. Please forgive me for being predictable, since this is by far the most famous moment in competitive gaming ever. Evo Moment 37 is pretty much a universal term that automatically instills a sense of hype and awe in anyone who hears it. So, at the risk of sounding cliche, let me tell you a bit about one of the most iconic moments in Evo history. August 4th, 2004, Pomona, California. Losers Finals. Going into this match, the two soon-to-be legends were already considered to be some of the greatest to ever play. On one hand, Justin J. Wong. On the other, Daigo the Beast Umehara. Two players bound by skill but always separated by brackets. Despite their lengthy tenures leading up to this point, these two never encountered each other in a tournament. Many people consider this to be an absolute dream match due to the wildly differing philosophies held by both men. Jaewong believing in turtling and a highly defensive slow play style, contrasting with Daigo's fast and tight approach of get in and never let your opponent breathe. Leading up to this moment, it's very clear that Daigo is getting frustrated with Jaewong's slow and steady pace, showing that this technique is working.
Rare footage of Daigo actually angry.
Going for some risky moves cost Daigo a round, and the game was tied at a round apiece. Starting off with a commanding lead, Jaewong has a huge life advantage against his opponent. After risking it all for some damage, Daigo manages to get Jaewong down to little over a quarter of health at the sacrifice of his own life. With a magic pixel left, Daigo plays it incredibly safe and has a bit of a stare down with Jaewong. These few seconds are like watching an Old West gunfight. Two incredibly skilled killers ready to draw at a moment's notice. After what must have felt like an eternity of waiting, and with 26 seconds left on the clock, it happens. Double quarter circle forward and kick. Jaewong activates Hoyoko-sen, and with just a sliver of health, this 17-hit super is sure to end the match via chip damage. But we all know the story, right?
Resurrection. You know what they say. The third strike is what counts. You know pain you can get into. One thing that I cannot do.
As each second passes, a lifetime takes place, and the mood of the room changes from anticipating a decisive conclusion to witnessing a man change his fate in real time. Now, to truly understand how insane this is, let's take a look at everyone's favorite friend, frame data. In simplistic terms, third strike runs at 60 FPS, so every frame is coming out at the speed of 1/60th of a second. A major mechanic in third strike is what's known as a parry. A parry is when you flick the control stick forward if it's a high attack, or down if it's a low one, with a 6 to 10 frame window of when an attack would connect, meaning that a player has at best 1/10 of a second to react and parry an attack. Parries are high risk, high reward as they nullify all damage and give you some wiggle room. But Mr. Umahara had no chance to breathe, as even one missed parry meant the end of his run. Chun-Li's super, as I mentioned, consists of 17 hits, so Daigo had to time the motion 16 times perfectly, then he had to input a jump and land a final aerial parry, on top of pulling off a fantastic combo to seal the round, all on a magic pixel and under the pressure familiar to most deep-sea submarines. This moment has been talked about ad nauseum, and personally, the thing that I see that's so beautiful about this isn't really Daigo, it's Jaewong. He didn't misplay, he didn't make a bad call, he made one of the safest choices he could have made given the circumstances. Unlike Choi, who played his hand to the best of his ability and won, Daigo threw his cards right back in the dealer's face and called upon some unholy force to pull off what is undoubtedly the most iconic moment in FGC history and become immortal. What can I say? You had to be there. Chapter 5, Revolution. Sonicfox changes the world. At the top of this video, I made a jab about how the FGC can be a bit homogenous, and that for a long time this was true. While the community is rooted in the Latinx and Black communities of SoCal, the amount of straight men marginally outweighs their counterparts. I'm not saying everyone in the FGC is some big manly man, no girls or gays allowed type, but for a while there was a stigma, especially around homosexuality. Homophobia was a common thing for a while, with words like the F-slur being tossed around like crazy. In their essay, Do Others Understand Us? Fighting Game Community Members' Perceptions of Others' Views of the FGC, Crystal Steltenpole, Jordan Reed, and Christopher Keys interviewed many FGC members about perceptions that the community has of itself, and one player had this to say: "I think it's shockingly accurate, and we as gamers need to step it up and help become guides to getting involved, instead of gatekeepers against women, LGBTQ+, etc. One participant who self-identified as a trans lesbian woman shared a specific example where she was watching an online stream of a tournament where a woman was doing very well. The stream chat during this time was filled with memes about women, comments about trannies, and suggestions for the men to not bother because her Twitter says she's a lesbian feminist," unquote. Linked in the description is a video by Core A Gaming about women in the FGC, and I highly recommend you watch it if you want more insight into this issue. Thankfully, the FGC has cleaned itself up considerably and has become more accepting, yet there are still ignorant people within it who reinforce these homophobic, transphobic, and misogynistic ideals. So what could possibly help the FGC change its image and be seen as the close-knit community that it truly is? Enter Sonicfox, which is a name familiar to most, if not all of you. Sonicfox is the best fighting games player in the world right now and would be considered one of the best of all time, no contest. Sonicfox popped up on most people's radars by being an openly furry player who wore their iconic fox ears to every set they played. It was a good image and led to some awesome moments, like in the MKX Grand Finals at EVO 2016, where Fox removed their ears and absolutely popped off. Along with being an openly furry player, Sonicfox has come out on multiple occasions to remind everyone that they're gay. The best of these is after their huge win at EVO 2018, where they tweeted out, "I'm gay," and also the best Dragon Ball FighterZ player on this fucking planet, don't forget it, which is honestly one of the most powerful things any human being has ever said. Some people took umbrage with this, shouting things like, "I hate it when gay people make it all about them being gay," and "don't bring politics into fighting games," and most hilarious of them all, "being gay isn't a personality." Sonicfox responded to such, air quotes, criticisms in an interview with ESPN where they said, quote, "The more fame that I have, the more I realize, why should I care what people think about me when I can just be me? That's how I made my brand. You should always just be yourself, and there will always be people who will like you." Sonicfox expanded upon this in 2019 when they came out as non-binary. Their coming out thread is well worth the read as it gives insights to the struggles that MB people go through with the societal standards for how we perceive gender. Sonicfox comes off very honest and vulnerable, which in turn makes their word all the more empowering for people who may need it or may be in a similar predicament. That's what's so important about Sonicfox. They aren't just one of the best ever, they're a role model. Kids around the world who have an interest in fighting games can see this player who's only 21 years old being the best on the face of the earth, all the while standing strong and being who they are. It's rare that the FGC has a real superhero in their midst, but Sonicfox is that hero. I will put good money on it that Sonicfox will be held in the same regard as the other FGC greats. Hell, they already kind of are. Sonicfox is the face of the FGC, and if that is the face of the revolution the FGC is undergoing, then this community is in great hands. Chapter 6. Old Age. Uncle Vae's Last Stand. From the face of tomorrow, let's take a look back at yesterday. Alex Valle is one of the old gods of the FGC, right up there with Choi Boy and Watts. He is also the first American Street Fighter player to play against Daigo. So Valle is baked into the DNA of the community whether you know it or not. Valle was a pretty successful player, winning a few Battle by the Bays, but never capturing gold at a proper EVO event. He placed highly, don't get me wrong, but he stands as more of a historical figure that plays from the back instead of a figurehead like Jay Wong or Daigo. And so it was for the mid-2000s to the early 2010s. Alex just played and played while retaining his legendary status, especially in his SoCal home. As time passed, Valle grew and a new generations of players stepped up to the plate. Many fresh faces came, and they went. But there was Uncle Valle, still playing. With some minor highlights here and there, Valle reserved himself to focus on new endeavors, and for a while it seemed as though he was finally over the hill and had moved on to pastures new. He is currently the CEO of Level Up and runs a lot of tournaments in the SoCal region, and it seemed as though this was his lot in life. A memory of the way things used to be. No longer a competitor, but still an old guard meant to stand watch over the blossoming community that he helped build. That is, of course, until EVO 2015, when unexpectedly the 36-year-old Uncle Valle entered the USF4 tournament with his trusted Hugo. It seemed like a fun nostalgia appearance meant to pop the crowd, but when he was set up in pools against 28-year-old rising up-and-comer named Bonchan, all hope was lost. Bonchan was, at the time, considered to be the best Sagat on the face of the earth, and with his nasty-ass roundhouse kick and phenomenal spacing, Sagat was sure to beat any and all grapplers who so dared to look at him wrong. Let me explain how much of a monster Bonchan is. The man was mentored by two of Japan's greats, Tokido and the ever-present Daigo. In 2014, he took second place at that year's EVO for USF4 and fully intended on shooting for the top. Getting out of pools was just an easy task, win a matchup he's favored in and maybe stomp a few more people. And so the stage was set, the second generation soldier versus the new Tiger King. And as the set began, two players shook hands and commentators gave a brief description as to who Alex Valle is by saying,
"So Alex Valle was the Justin Wong before Justin Wong."
This was to be a true clash of generations, and as Valle hesitates to pick Ryu, and instead he goes for his Hugo. The match itself starts, you see the commentators very shocked at Valle's choice, and Bonchan decides to play up, getting off some cheeky damage here and there. Throughout the match, the commentators are very critical of how shaky Valle's play is, but give him the credit he's due as he takes round 1. But then something interesting happens. He takes round 2 as well, meaning he took game 1 on the best Sagat in the world. What a strange thing, most people probably thought. And as we move into game 2, Valle immediately starts with a running command grab, the thing Bonchan had been playing around this whole time. Then, in that moment, time itself didn't just stand still, it began to move backwards. 15 long years of age immediately ticked back, and it was the year 2000 again. Valle looked to be in his prime, and Bonchan was nothing but a child in that moment. The rest of this set is just Uncle Valle taking Bonchan to school. As he shed the dregs of time, Uncle Valle let the world know that he wasn't dead yet, and he still had a lot of fight in him. He ended up taking the set 2-0, not even dropping a round. Valle didn't go much further than that though. His run ended fairly quickly. But who cares? He went out on an absolute bang and showed the world why you should respect your elders. Alex Valle shows that while you have your legacies when you're still around, you can always add on to it. It doesn't matter how old you are, how over the hill they say you are, it matters how good you think you are. And god damn it, he was the best in that moment. Chapter 7. Death. Smash never learns. This is probably the thing that will make the most people mad at me, but let me put this out there before we continue. Yes, I do enjoy Smash, and I have the utmost respect for Smash pros who put in hours upon hours into owning their craft, and the stuff people pull off in Melee is amazing to watch. But I do have a major issue with the Smash community. See, I've been talking about the older generations of the FGC and celebrating that history, but I also acknowledge the new faces in the crowd that are set to lead the fighting game community into a new golden age. The thing is, Smash doesn't just celebrate its past, it's trapped by it. Now, I could show a whole range of bad stuff the Smash community has done, like that one guy at a Weeklies who wanted a dude to drop a stock because he paused so that that dude could plug his controller back in, or Armada being a big piss baby and dropping out of a whole tournament because his broken controller started working as it should, but those are unimportant. The one that matters the most to my point is the story of Bocce. Bocce was a 15-year-old Smash player who entered AON 2019 and was matched up against one of the best Smash Ultimate players in Ally. She ended up taking the set in what was considered a major upset, and normally this would be met with some people going absolutely ballistic and celebrating her win. This story doesn't go in that direction, sadly. You see, the Bocce situation is a very tricky one to get around, with a lot of she said, he said. Long story short, after her win against Ally, Bocce was harassed relentlessly on Twitter by Ally fans, almost to the point of quitting the scene altogether. Then word came out that Bocce said some unsavory things over Discord, and this somehow justified bullying a 15-year-old online. Bocce using racial slurs is obviously a stupid and harmful action that deserves recompense. But those who were using it as means to back up their prior harassment were simply looking for something post ex facto to warrant their crusade against, and I repeat, a 15-year-old child whose initial crime was winning at a video game. A short while after, Ally was accused of and officially owned up to dating a 16-year-old male when he was 27 and promptly left the scene. There is no greater meaning to the Bocce story other than just the facts. The main takeaway I have from this is less about those involved and more emblematic to how the Smash community is portrayed and portrays itself. Smash players in general are so resistant to change in any and all forms that the idea that a new face in the scene triumphing over an established star was met with such vitriol and malice isn't even that much of a rare occurrence. This kind of thing doesn't happen overnight. Since the release of Brawl in 2008, Smash players have been clamoring for this return to Melee. I understand that talking about a story where a young kid is bullied out of the scene and then transitioning into how a community bitches about their game is tone deaf, but both of these things tie into my point of Smash being trapped by its past. In both perception of their game and perception of its players, Smash is a regressive scene that feels stagnant. The gods of Smash aren't treated like the gods of the FGC. Unlike a Jay Wong, who is a respected elder, a player like Leffen is more of a dictator than a revered king. Now, I don't hate all of the old gods of Smash. I'm actually quite a big Mango fan, mostly due to his laissez-faire attitude towards the game. He takes it seriously and tries his best, but he knows that he's kind of past his best days, and is more interested in seeing who will rise above and be the new stars.
What the?
With every passing Evo that it isn't at, Melee players act like years are being taken off of their lives, despite the fact that Smash Ultimate is a shoo-in every single time. As I mentioned in a previous chapter, the FGC has begun to shed its negative perceptions by embracing figures like Sonicfox, yet Smash players are still perceived to be immature crybabies who throw a hissy fit whenever this one fucking game isn't at a tournament.
Every Ultimate player should boycott EVO and just not go.
This isn't an unfair perception to have either. Despite my respect for Melee pros for their time and effort into learning their game, I don't respect how Smash players act. There is a fine line between some healthy, fun thuggery and just being an actual toxic shithole community.
You are literally the worst player in this whole tournament. Oh my gosh, it is unbelievable how dog you are at this game. It's so sad knowing that there is a person on this planet that is as untalented at video games as you are.
No, I like Justin.
What? What the fuck? You're so dog shit at this game, dude.
And Smash crossed that line so long ago that that line evolved and grew legs to walk even further away. True enough, you can spit this all back at me and say, but what about the FGC though? And yeah, while I already acknowledge the shortcomings therein, it still doesn't solve the Smash community's problems. Instead of putting their best foot forward and changing their image, they just wallow in their negative stereotypes, whether it be intentional or not. The constant want of the Smash community to be accepted by the FGC while spitting in the face of everything the FGC stands for is not only insulting, it's just sad. I pray for the Smash community to improve and to one day be accepted by the rest of the FGC, since Smash fills this fantastic role. While having a lower bar of entry to get into, Smash is still a deeply complex and fascinating game, steeped in reading and mind games mixed with flawless execution. A high-tier Melee match is like watching a shonen battle. It's insane. The problem isn't the game they play, but the people who play it. So hopefully Smash players take a shower and grow up a little bit, lest the stink of their past kill any chances they have for a hopeful future. Chapter 8, Rebirth, Raising the Future. Admittedly, ending this video off on such a downer, mean-spirited ending like the last chapter isn't what I want people to take away from this. So, what is the proper way to shape the future of fighting games when it comes to that next up-and-coming generation? Enter the story of Noah Solis and his run at EVO 2011. Noah at the time was a mere 8 years old and entered the main stage tournament for MBC3. Now, I'm 19, and if I were on main stage at EVO, I'd fucking shit my pants. So, how this child went up there and took names is beyond me. In his run, the true highlight was his win against Eric Valdez, better known as Royal Flush. Since he knew it was a lose-lose when it came to getting the crowd on his side, Flush went with a wacky-ass team and did his best given the situation. He didn't necessarily underestimate his young opponent, but he definitely wasn't playing at 100%. While holding that L to an 8-year-old will haunt Valdez for the rest of his life, he doesn't see it as a bad thing. In an interview with Giant Bomb, Valdez said, "There's some people that get really mad after they lose. I was psyched that he won. I don't really know how I would have acted if I'd won the match. It's always a good feeling when you win, but when you lose to someone good, or it's not like you got randomed out." He lost pretty badly, but honestly, that doesn't really matter. He just lost a match to a player who was better than him. He described Noah as surprisingly patient for his age, and Noah actually does do a solid job and has a great grasp of fundamentals. In that same Giant Bomb interview, they asked Noah how he handles losing, and his father stepped in to answer, saying, "I've seen Noah cry after a loss." You see, the thing is, Noah was literally just a kid in the biggest tournament of his life. And when he lost, of course he'd get emotional. I know I cried when I lost when I was a little kid. But you see, what's important in this story isn't how Noah turned out or what he does going forward. What matters is that the crowd is going absolutely crazy for this little kid trying his best on the biggest stage in the world. They boo whoever is playing him, and they are loving everything Noah is doing. All of his competition are both kind and supportive of him, making sure that he is getting better and learning as he goes on. No matter how old you are, no matter who you are, anyone and everyone can learn and they can excel at what they do. Noah still plays competitively to this day and does a pretty good job with it. With the encouragement and support he was given when he was young, he sparked a love for fighting games, and it made him into a better person. Because that's how the FGC ensures its future, by using its past as fertile soil to plant tomorrow in. Epilogue. Life is beautiful. The FGC is an infinitely expanding tapestry, much like life itself. Everything flows into a multitude of other stories to create an endlessly woven narrative, a crashing tide of heroes and villains, and at the end of the day, it's all just people having fun playing their games. I could have talked about a million other stories, like 13-0, and just how gently K-Brad put down those headphones. But I'll leave that to you, my dear viewer, to seek out on your own. Whether they be an old god or a young talent, that's what unites the FGC through thick and thin. All we want to do is play our games. I may speak in high grandeur about these people and their silly little games, but despite how silly they may be, these things have meaning, because life has meaning. And conversely, their games are beautiful, so that only means that life is beautiful as well. These folks have dedicated their lives to training and bettering the community around them. They feed the machines their quarters, and one day, they'll run out. And when that day comes, they'll leave that arcade head held high, knowing that they're a legend who has forever shaped that scene. After one final set, it's all over, and the journey is complete. And that's what's left. Stories. And that right there, those stories, those memories, That's the meaning of life. My name's Michael. Let's talk again soon.
She can